for over 30 years without a personnel change. So it's been really, it's been pretty incredible to establish a sound as a section. You know, that's lasted a long time.
Yeah, you guys sound great. And then you had Dave Holland and Carla Bley experiences, like kind of some experiences on the.
Well, I did one record for Carla Bley, and I loved her and Steve Swallow, and that was, oh my God, what a beautiful experience, because I loved her. I mean, I loved her music and Steve's music as well. But it was only one record and a couple gigs. It wasn't a very involved scene that it was just really a handful of times and this one record. And then, but then Dave called me. So, and that became a whole, I mean, that was another experience that was mind blowing and eye opening and ear opening because, Dave wrote, I mean, he wrote the most beautiful big band music, like self-taught, like kind of a combination of Kenny Wheeler and Billy Strayhorn and Duke, just the most beautiful writing you can imagine.
A great musician.
Oh man, one of the most incredible musicians and one of the most incredible people too. Just that was a high point in my life, was playing with him. Just being around him was just unbelievable high level in every way. But he would write these vamps like, so it was Chris Potter, Antonio Hart, me, and every time Dave would hand out a new piece, I'd be like, and if it was in like an odd meter, like in 11, and it was a lot of these vamps that would just go around and around and around and around, and Nate Smith and Billy Kilson and Steve Nelson, and just, they were so comfortable playing these open odd meter form. They're not even forms. I mean, there were forms, but they were just these vamps, and no doubt they were just, it was amazing to me. And I would just, every time they would hand out a new piece, I'd like, please don't make me blow on this in front of Chris Potter, please. I want to play in 4. I'm an old bebop guy. I don't want, so I think he got that, to hear Chris Potter and Antonio Hart play and Mark Gross play these open 11, 13, these vamps, which I never came from that world. I didn't grow up playing like that. So that was an unbelievable experience for me to try and just to be in the middle of all that. And sometimes, Dave would play and I would play we would just play vamp, baritone, and bass unison lines together. And his time was just, man, locking into his time and his sound was just, wow. I didn't care about soloing, just, playing with him, playing these
with him.
So hip. It was like the greatest thing ever.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It was such an incredible experience to play his music. And then we did one tour. We did an octet tour. We did a UK Arts Council tour all over England. And Kenny Wheeler played trumpet, which was also a high point of my musical life, being around him every day.
Yeah, I had a wonderful time with him in Vancouver one year. They booked us for two concerts, and it was very interesting. One concert was with a guy named Paul Plimpton or Paul, get his name, but he was an avant-garde. I've been playing with Paul Bley a bit and playing some little avant-garde this period where I was stepping outside.
Yeah.
I did a record of free music with Abercrombie and Bley.
Wow.
The Night Bathers, and I think that kind of messed me up because Orrin Keaton heard that and he thought that was how I played all the time.
And that was it.
So he never took me
seriously. For you.
I never got that one. I never got with Miles. Which was, strangely unusual luck. But anyway, we had Kenny Wheeler and I. We had one night with these avant-garde Vancouver players, and then one night with a more conventional rhythm section, Toronto cats. I think Bernie Snetsky and those cats.
Oh yeah.
And I remember Kenny was beautiful. Then we ran into each other at this little one day lunch, and he said, I'd never met him before. We just played those 2 nights, and he said, it was such a beautiful experience. He said, playing together. I brought him down to the classical place to play with Bert Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Down there, a wonderful saxophone player who probably was the only guy in the world practiced more than you, me, and Joe Henderson because he was in a wheelchair most of his life, and
Hmm.
this guy would practice 16 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he really,
Something, huh?
yeah, he could make a saxophone talk just about, But anyway, um, Kenny, we went down to this place and we sat in and played there, and he said, man, he said, last night, he said, I'll never forget the experience of you and me playing You've Changed outdoors while the sun was setting and this beautiful Vancouver sunset behind us playing You've Changed. He said, remember, wasn't that a groove? He was just so nice about it with that British accent. And
Yeah, he was a really incredibly just beautiful person. He's just so, humble and gracious, and but one of the best musicians of all time, without a
yeah,
doubt.
I had a ball with him. I realized the depth that he,
Oh, heavy, just
yeah,
beyond.
I guess he was Canadian, but he sounded
Yeah,
like British.
he was Canadian.
I
Yeah,
think he spent so
and
much time there. It sounded like,
his big band writing was just nothing like it. This record, music for large and small ensembles. The first 4 minutes of that is a chorale that is just, if you haven't heard it, you should hear it. It's with Norma Winstone on top. I mean, it's to take your breath away. I've listened to it dozens and dozens of times, and it makes me. It's very emotional. Four
what's it
minutes
called
of
again?
the record is, it's a double CD on ECM, music for large and small ensemble. But it's like, and it's a beautiful record. But there's this chorale in the beginning that opens up. It's just, it's the most beautiful thing you'll ever hear in your life.
There's some people I want to ask you about, like since we're going through some of these things, that I know that you've played with.
Yeah.
Some of these people are, people that we both knew pretty well. So a guy like Ronnie Cuber,
Oh,
for
okay. Yeah.
example, who just left us, and talk about Pepper taking no prisoners.
Yeah, Ronnie. So I had a group with Ronnie and Nick. We had a group of 3 baritones for about 8 years. And
Wow.
so it was 3
Nick Brignola, we
baritones,
need to tell you.
Nick Brignola, Ronnie Cuber, and myself playing Jerry Mulligan music, and with at bass and drums. So with 3 baritones, bass and drums. And those 2 guys were really something together. I mean, Ronnie and Nick, they were just standing between those 2 guys. It was like really larger than life in every way. And, like you said, be like super competitive, take no prisoner, really like, and I learned a lot just being around those 2 guys, man. That was an incredible experience for me. And then, hearing them play every night was just, man, just what an incredible experience to be between those 2 sounds and concepts.
That must have been beautiful. Ronnie and I did quite a bit of playing at one point, at sessions, and
Yeah.
fit in with each other. Oh, Carmen Leggio is the cat I was trying to think of from
Carmen Leggio from Yonkers. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was another one of those. I always thought he was from upstate, but I guess he was from
He was
Yonkers.
from Yonkers. He used to, yeah. So Carmen Leggio gave the best master class ever. So check this out. So yeah, I mean, so he also, I think Carmen played in the saxophone section. He was subbing, I think, for Joe Farrell or Eddie Daniels, and so Dodgen was playing lead alto. So he was sitting next to Jerry, and so they played Fingers, which has this ferocious saxophone solo in there.
That chart. I mean,
Yeah, rhythm.
yeah.
Rhythm changes chart real fast, and so the saxophone solo is, you play it in halftime unaccompanied, and then you play it the regular time in regular time unaccompanied a cappella. So Carmen was standing up and playing this thing. I don't know, man. And he turned around at Jerry and he said, "How'd I look?"
He's doing that. He's sight reading, right? He's like,
Yeah, he couldn't be. I don't know if he played any of it, but he turned to Jerry, and Jerry loved that story. He turned around and he said, "How'd I look?"
That's great.
Isn't that great? So
See, that's that Italian. That's
Yeah.
why I thought he was from upstate too, because he had that kind of wit.
No, I think he's from Yonkers. But anyway, so someone asked him a question I love this, at a master class once, and said, "Mr. Leggio," he goes, "what do you do for a hot meal on the road?" And he said, I put the jar of peanut butter on the television.
Oh, that's beautiful. I put the jar of peanut butter on the television. That's
That's what he does for a hot meal on the road.
yeah. Well, then we got to get to the road stories. You know,
Isn't that great though? That's
that's
like
great. I put the jar of peanut butter on the television,
that's the greatest master class of all time.
and he just came up with that. That
Yeah,
was
he just came off. That's what he came up with. That's what he
that's
said.
that's an absolute classic.
That's the greatest.
That
That's
that
the greatest clinic of all time.
yeah.
It's funny.
And you know, well, yeah. So Ronnie was quite something too. You know, Ronnie is one of the only cats that had ever happened to me where uh, he beat me up bad on Donna Lee one night. I sat in with him and Tom Harrell,
Mm-hmm.
Pete Basil, and they had been playing for a couple of sets. And Ronnie said, "Ah, go, Ben, you just live around the corner. Go get your horn. Come on, play the last set with us." So I thought that was a good idea at the moment. And I'd had a couple of drinks,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't seem like it was going to affect me too much.
Mm-hmm.
I get my horn and come over, and it's time for the last set. And Ronnie goes, "Donnelly, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
And normally that wouldn't faze me too much.
Mm-hmm.
But Ronnie took the first solo, and he played everything you can
Mm-hmm.
play. and it was actually frightening.
Yeah.
He played so well.
He could be frightening, man. When he was on his game, he was. I mean, it was nothing in the world like. He was a force in nature, man. Really.
Yeah, my knees started knocking.
Yeah.
I got through a couple of choruses, put my horn away, and
Yeah.
left the club feeling just disgusted with myself. You know,
Mm-hmm.
just so bad. He was like getting mugged.
Yeah.
And the only other guy that ever did that made me feel that way. One night, Bob Berg got me on something. I can't remember what it was, but
Mm-hmm.
I remember that you know, it wasn't one of the Coltrane tunes because I mean, all of those he had mastered that, but it's on something that I knew
Mm-hmm.
right up my alley, and Bob just
Mm-hmm.
played so much on it that it you
Yeah,
know,
there's guys like that, right? It's just it's yeah, it's really it's some. So I know what it feels like. Like so Ronnie would play, then Nick would play, and then I would play. I'm like, wow, there's nothing. I mean, these guys played everything already. There's nothing left to play.
yeah, right, you leave me something, you know.
Yeah, they leave nothing. Not even a lot of crumb or a scrap or anything. So those guys, I think they were very. I mean, that was old school competitive. I think they were definitely like that. They were, and for me, I love that because it was like, okay, you got to up your game. It's like that's like you said, playing with people that are better than you, who make you up your game. So that was a really great experience to
Yeah,
to spend all those years with Nick and Ronnie on and playing together. That was such a gift. Really, I learned so much.
I imagine you did. I mean, you know, another. Well, I mean, you probably played with all of these. You know, Roger Rosenberg's great.
Oh man, they're all great. Yes, and they're. I mean, it's the baritone community is small. But it's close knit. There's so many, and there's, that now there's been like this resurgence of young musicians, a real interest in playing the baritone. Young musicians in college who are really taking this instrument up in a serious way, and it's really nice to see that. It's and where it used to be like in a lot of jazz college programs, there were a lot of alto players, a lot of tenor players, and nobody wanted to play the baritone. So it was a lot of times it was like the person who didn't want to play the baritone had to play the baritone because there were too many altos and too many baritones. But that's really not the situation so much anymore. There's this, there's young baritone players really coming to the fore and really interested in playing this instrument as a dedicated voice, which I'm finding really heartening. I'm really enjoying. I think that's just a great.
Well, you may be part of the reason they're doing that. You know,
I think we're all part of it. I just
no, but you're getting some exposure. You know, that they get to hear you. You've made quite a few records, and
yeah, maybe,
and
yeah.
that helps. You know, another instrument that's getting to be a main force. I've had some students lately that bass clarinet as a main axe.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, there's a whole little community of that going on as well. There's and to hear, and a lot of these guys are coming right out of Berg too. It's funny. I hear more more bass clarinet, just as many bass clarinet players coming from Charlie Parker as I hear alto players.
Yeah, there definitely is. I see that, and I apologize for not remembering the name. There's a bass clarinetist in New York, an Italian guy who plays Stefano Dogliani, right?
Dogliani, yeah.
Yeah, he plays unbelievable bass clarinet, and he's a bobster, So I think maybe that's I'm sure that, I mean, having and Chris Potter plays great bass clarinet. There are people who definitely play the instrument. So I think, maybe it's a sound that young people are grabbing onto. Maybe not a lot, but I think that it's definitely not uncommon. I mean, it's uncommon, but it's not like unheard of anymore.
Yeah, it's good. You're and we got to mention Claire Daly.
Of course,
who was one of my students.
Yeah, it's hard. That's just unbelievably horrible loss. Just one of the nicest people, just a tragic loss. Too young, and I mean, there are just really no words except that it's a drag.
Yeah, it's.
She was really such a sweetheart, and she came. The thing is, we did a memorial for Ronnie. So we did this thing that we did this gig, a baritone. We did a baritone festival at Ornithology, on maybe around Christmas a couple of years ago. The day that Ronnie died, we had 10 baritone saxophone lead bands in 12 hours from noon to midnight, and Ronnie died that day. The day we did this trip, this whole big festival, which was, that was a drag. But then anyway, and then Claire had gotten sick after that, and then we did 4 bands representing 4 different periods in Ronnie's career, like playing with George Benson, then the Latin side of all the Latin gigs he did, and then they were just kind of 4 parts of Ronnie's. Well, I mean, he played so much music, and so Claire actually came to that and played, which was incredible. She played what she could, not a lot, but she showed up and she stayed the whole time. And it was a tough battle she had with cancer.
I'm so sorry. I knew her when she was a student. I went and taught at Berkeley for 3 semesters. When she was a student at Berkeley, and she was an alto player then too. I don't believe she played baritone yet. I believe I met her as an alto player. And she got into film as well. She did some short movies. She was trying to do that, and But anyway, I do miss her too.
And also, I'm going to go back to Ronnie for a second. The thing about Ronnie that was also singular, really, and for me, is that he could play funk, bebop, Latin. You couldn't put this guy in a category. He played everything great. I mean, where, I don't consider I can't play funk. I sound horrible and stupid when I play funk. I just can't do it. It's not a vehicle that I feel that I can play really well. This guy he played everything. He played bebop, Latin, Horace Silver tunes. I mean, this guy played everything. The blues.
Yeah, he could play Horace Silver tunes. He could sit and play a Konitz or Tristano tune with you, and sound like Warren Mark.
I mean, the guy had he had no boundaries in terms of like blocking him into anything. He was comfortable in every style of music and equally great, which was like, man, there's not too many people you could say that about.
You know what else I miss about Ronnie too? He was one of the great storytellers.
Oh yeah.
When you got him to talk about his life,
mm-hmm.
I mean, a couple of times we used to like to really sit around and, have a couple of tastes and everything, and I'd get him into talking about. In fact, one of my big regrets is I didn't get to get him on this podcast.
That would have been great.
Where he passed, but he'd tell me about going out to hear Coltrane and Miles and everything when he was in high school at Berlin and all that kind of stuff, you know. And
Yeah, he was, and he was playing great when he was 17, 18 years old with George Benson. I mean, the guy, and with the Newport Youth Band with Marshall Brown and all, man.
well, you know, I heard him with George Benson
Mm-hmm.
about 1960, 67, I think,
Mm-hmm.
in Boston at the Jazz Workshop, Paul's Mall.
Mm-hmm.
I was up there staying with my grandmother in Lynn, and there was this TV show hosted by a clarinet player named Stan something in Boston. And every week he had, it was sort of like a local jazz casual where they, whoever was at the workshop or Lenny's, they would have a little half an hour or with the, you know, the band that was there. And this guy had George Benson, who I'd never heard of,
Mm.
and neither had anybody else. Because he said, now this week at the Jazz Workshop, this young band, and there was they'll be playing, and they play. He sang "A Foggy Day," I think, and they played some kind of bluesy thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, you know, I'm going to get into Boston, you know, go take the bus into Boston and go down to the workshop, and I could get in because Barty, who owned the Jazz Workshop, was a tenor player who had played in my dad's big band many years before. So he let me into the club and would sit me somewhere where I wouldn't be seen, if you know what I mean, where I could kind of be hidden away because I was only 14.
Yeah, you're underage. Yeah.
Yeah, 14 or 15. And I went to hear them. So the funny thing was, honestly, it was the last set on like a Thursday night, and there were maybe 6 people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first time I heard Ronnie, and the first time I'd heard George Benson and Jimmy Lovelace, and,
Yeah,
and Lonnie Smith.
yeah, Lonnie Smith. Yeah,
That was the band,
unbelievable band.
and unbelievable band. And of course, you know, I had been playing for about 2 years, and I just finished Phil Woods' camp.
Mm-hmm.
Phil heard me and gave me a scholarship there, where, you know, I met Mike Brecker and Roger Rosenberg and some other cats. But, you know, Ronnie was about 4 years older than me. I think Ronnie wasn't that much older,
Mm-hmm.
because he was under 20, and I remember that was real inspiration. Hear somebody
Right?
who played like that. That was he was setting a bar. To, okay, well, put in 2 more hours a day to get there. And
Yeah, it was. I can imagine how powerful it is. Being a young person and hearing somebody just a few years older than you playing at a completely different level than you, it's like, wow, you know, really makes you want to go home and practice more, right? It's really inspiring.
yeah, it was. Now, when it said you played with Bill Evans, that was Bill Evans, the saxophone player, or did you play with Bill Evans, the piano player?
I never played with Bill Evans, a piano player. No, I heard him a lot.
Yeah, me too.
And you know, Bill Evans, the saxophone player, maybe that wasn't. I don't know where that came from.
It's
But
either.
I heard Bill Evans with Philly Joe.
I heard him the night he fired Philly Joe.
You did?
Yeah, in fact, Bill, I knew Bill. I won't go into the whole story.
Yeah, I didn't. I just introduced myself a couple of, but I heard him a lot. I mean, I would go all the time.
I have a story that I'll tell you sometime, you know, that because I've told it on this show before and everything, but I knew Bill, and Bill I never asked him to sit in or anything, but he would sometimes on the gig just come and sit with me. He'd get off the bandstand, and and I usually had a little table at the Vanguard toward the wall, and he would just get off the bandstand instead of going to the dressing room right away. He'd sit down with me.
Wow.
And I remember 2 distinct discussions I had with him one time. One time he looked dissatisfied, and I thought he sounded pretty good, very good actually. But he was like, I said, Bill, you look unhappy. What's wrong? Because he sat down with me, you know. And he said, you know, you try to find a feeling. And I said, yeah. He said, I said, what do you mean? I mean, he said, yeah, you know, improvising, he said, blowing is like you dig deep inside yourself to try to find a feeling. And that feeling can be very elusive. You think you've got it, and then you don't. He said, sometimes you've got it from the first note, and you know it's there the whole night. Other nights you chase it around, and you hardly find it.
Yeah, that's just a great way to put it. It's so correct. It's a beautiful way to say it.
Yeah, he said that set right now, to me, is the most frustrating kind because I had it by the tail, or something. He didn't quite say it like that, but
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I was chasing it, and I was finding this feeling. I was finding the feeling, and then where was it? Where'd it go? And then getting it back. He said that was a struggle I was having with finding this elusive thing.
Wow.
You know, so he would just say little nuggets like that. So one night, and this is
Wow.
the very last night he played with Philly Joe, I found out they're at the Vanguard, and he was auditioning different bass players,
Mm-hmm.
and he had Michael Moore on bass.
Mm-hmm.
I had worked with Chet and with Konitz, so Mike and I were pretty tight at that time.
Yeah.
And Philly Joe had played a very bad set. He was quite felt drunk.
Yeah.
Bows were all over the place. The volume was, he might lock in too for a minute, sound good. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that bad, but definitely it was a rough. Bill was not having an easy time of it, and he wasn't that expressive when you looked at Bill. You didn't really know how he felt if you just listened. But he came off the bandstand, and again he sat at my little table. I was by myself, and he kept repeating to himself. He said, "How do you tell a friend? How do you tell a friend?" And I finally said, after he said it a couple times, I said, "How do you tell a friend what, Bill?" He said, "Well, Philly Joe is my favorite drummer and my best friend. We've been friends for 20 years.
Right.
We have been the best of friends. And how do I tell him? What I'm asking is, how do you tell a friend that you can't play with him anymore?
Wow.
And that this may be the last night that we may ever play together."
Wow, that's a heavy moment.
He said, "And I've got to do this, and I have to do this tonight." He said, "I'm going to wait till the end of the gig. I'm going to go through the next set and try to call the night a little early. And then I have to do this. It's something I can't avoid."
Wow.
And, uh,
He really confided in you.
yeah, I mean, not a lot. I mean, these are the 3 or 4 times he did say things like that are etched in my memory.
I
Very
was
strong.
always so not nervous, but just very. I mean, I held him in such high esteem that I had a hard time even approaching him and starting a conversation. I just did. I didn't. I felt so unconfident being, hearing him play. I'm like, wow, this guy's just like. Because when he was on, I mean, it was just always inspiring. He would play these intros to Nardis that were like 10 minutes long, just these
Yeah,
long exploratory, improvisations on the blowing around Nardis. It's like when he would come in with the melodies, like, man, that was incredible. And I heard him do it a lot. So like, he would walk by and I'd be like, I would just thank you. I don't know. I just couldn't really. It was almost like hero worship to the point where being unable to say anything.
well, I've been working on Nardis lately. Isn't that funny? I just decided to. We used to play it with Chet,
Yeah.
and Chet was like so funny that way because very difficult and unusual songs were a specialty of his,
Hmm.
which was amazing because he couldn't tell you the names of the changes or.
Right. He couldn't tell you the chords at all.
Yeah, well, Jerry Mulligan put it so beautifully. He said Chet knows everything about chords except their names. And,
I mean, wow. I mean, but that's like really like, or natural instincts,
yeah,
incredible ears. I think Zoot was like that too, right? He
Zoot
played,
was like that, and Stan Getz was like that.
Stan Getz was like, they couldn't tell you the chord. Like, if, that record Focus
Oh yeah, the
with
Eddie
Eddie
Sauter
Sauter and the string
record.
quartet
Yeah,
and Roy Haynes. I mean,
yeah,
that whole record is improvised, man. That's like the most incredible improvisation you'll ever hear.
yeah. He was and I'm sure the chord sheets didn't mean anything to him. They had the changes, but he just listened to the charts and
Did
reacted.
he? Did he have chord sheets?
I believe there were chord sheets for it,
Oh, okay. I see. I
but
thought he just was like, I just thought that was a total reactionary mode to the hearing the strings. I didn't know that he had anything visual at all.
I'm not sure either. I couldn't say whether he
But
did.
that's for me one of the deepest examples of pure improvisation on. I love that record.
Yeah, I especially when I was younger, I copied a lot of that. The first 2 years that I played the saxophone, because there were passages on it that were accessible.
So beautiful too.
You know, I mean,
Oh,
you know,
man.
he was virtuosic, but he wasn't showy virtuosic.
Never,
I
right?
mean, you could just hear those phrases, and I would play along with those. And I'd just go through the record and play every phrase with him that I could find.
So Chet played Nardis. I know that's interesting.
Oh yeah, there's I think 2 examples on the internet of him playing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he would really find places to take it that were fascinating, you know. And I'd be sitting there, well, you know, how do you go from E minor to F major?
Right.
What's the difference, and what kind of note?
Right.
You know, and yeah, what do I do about that?
You can get over analytical, and you get to the point where you're paralyzed. You can't play anything.
Yeah, so that's what, you know. Now I'm kind of working on it, and kind of I don't know, you know, the last few sessions I've tried to play it once.
Mm-hmm.
Session.
It's a hard
Over
song.
and play with me, but it is a hard song because it's
Very hard song.
yeah, it's weird without, you know. I mean, Stan, on the other hand, one thing he told me, because I got to know Stan around the time I was 13 and stuff, but he said one thing you can do. He said play piano.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Stan, it's funny because in many ways he could be egotistical
Mm-hmm.
and this kind of thing, but in other ways, and especially maybe because I was a kid, he was very humble with me.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you know, one limit, like he said that thing that's now famous, but I heard him say it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you know, the saxophone can be, the perfect saxophone player would have Zoot's time, Al Cohn's harmony,
Mm-hmm.
and his technique. And he said, you know, stuff like that. He said, but the one thing, and he would let me play. It was weird. He was staying in this hotel in Miami Beach,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd come and visit him. I lent him my record player. He stayed for almost 2 weeks on
Wow.
vacation, and sent for his kids and everything. And we would hang out. He'd just come over, and he sat out in the sun on the patio in his underwear with a bucket of spare ribs, and smoking his Marlboros and drinking wine, a bottle of wine, and he'd do that all day.
Wow.
And then he'd say, I had a Holton alto and a School Martin tenor, and they were not good. So Stan would say, you want to practice? Play my horn. And he didn't touch his horn, you know. And he told me that. I said, you don't practice. He said, I practice all the time in my head. And he taught me how to practice in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Just imagine, envision it, and he told me that. But the other thing he said, now, you know, when you practice, he said, don't play the whole hour. He said, you practice for an hour? He said, play about 45 minutes and rest 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do with that rest, he said, don't get out of music. Go to the piano.
Mm-hmm.
He said, play at least 15 minutes of piano an hour.
Mm-hmm.
He said, my biggest regret, he said for him, was a regret that he says he didn't play enough piano.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he had such respect for great pianists as well. But he said, you know, he didn't know the changes.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I can't tell you what the changes are. You know, when a pianist, I want to play a song, then the pianist, we have to sit and I tell him what I hear as he plays them.
He was also really adventurous in terms of his, you know, playing with Chick and Gary Burton and, you know, all these folks. He was really like, he always moved forward in terms of where the music was at the moment. You know, he was always relevant, I thought.
Yeah, I think he was. And I think he liked, you know, I mean, you got to think that when he came out with Early Autumn and the Four Brothers and that whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the time, that was considered, quote, the avant-garde.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was like the most modern stuff out there.
Yeah. And
And
the group with Jimmy Rainey and Al Haig, all that, you know, with Shadow Wilson, like playing Hershey Bar and all those, I mean, it was amazing.
yeah, well,
Heads,
Jimmy
man.
Rainey's doing Motion and Lee and
Yeah, Mosh, all those records, man. That's like, that band was, wow, incredible.
yeah, the Storyville stuff. You know, all
I love all those records.
well, me too. You know, and he, I think he got used to being in the forefront of the music,
Mm-hmm.
and that was something that made him special because he would consistently find these cats. Oh, a good new thing just came out of him too. Gets at the Gate, where he's got Steve Kuhn, John
Oh.
Neves,
Yeah,
wonderful bass, who's the bass player on Focus,
exactly. Yeah.
and Roy Haynes.
Oh man, okay.
And this is like that's the it's right around that period where he's transitioning. I think he had just recorded Focus around that time,
Hmm.
and he's transitioning into just about to catch on with the bossa nova,
Right.
but he's hanging on to the his bebopping.
Yeah.
And
I mean, just yeah. I mean, there's what can you say
but
about Stan Getz?
but I'll tell you the Bill Evans story at another time. That you'll
Okay, I'm gonna because, like I said, I saw him. I can't even countless times, and just I mean, I didn't. I tried not to miss any sets when he was there. You know, just like at such a high level. It was like,
yeah. In fact, I would see you sometimes at the Vanguard.
yeah, I hung out there a lot when Max was alive, and it was really a real focal point. And I mean, New York, I said, you knew better than me because you're a little older, but Bradley's, Angry Squire, and all the, I mean, the clubs in New York, it was just cooking.
Yeah. I used to call it Bradley's University.
Yeah.
Those cats would. I wrote a thing on Facebook yesterday to Benny Green because we were talking about changes of the song "Is You,"
Hmm.
and he talked about Mike LeDun mentioned the change that Barry had showed him,
Hmm.
and then I mentioned the change that you can use at the end of the bridge. That either I found it myself or Albert Daly showed it to me, so I couldn't remember. But I said probably Albert, And then we talked about that, and Betty Green said that's such a hip New York reaction. You were there to peep that in that time, and I said, well, he just had to go to Bradley's, and I remember you'd hear Bradley would sit down at the piano, and he'd lock the doors of the club. It was only his after hours people could be there,
Hmm.
and he would sit down at the piano and play something like "You're My Thrill," and then the next thing you know, Tommy Flanagan or Jimmy Rowles or Barry or Walter Davis or
Hmm.
Seeger or one of those cats would say, that's nice, Bradley. You know what I like to do on the bridge? The second half, here's my heart. You know, um,
Yeah, I mean, that's
and then you'd have the next guy go, yeah, I like that, but then this and that, and then even Joe Albany would get up and say, what I like there is this.
wow.
And then Bradley would let me because Bradley liked my ballad playing.
Hmm.
Because and he'd let me get my horn out real quietly to like play at a whisper. So while those guys were going through the tune, I'd they'd say, oh, here's the change here. I play this change, and they'd splash the chord there, and I
Hmm.
kind of run it quietly, play the melody, and do that, and nobody seemed to mind. So I got to do that, and
So you have like your experience of, I mean, you're really blessed in like being able to play around all these great folks hearing you and being accepted into this community. It's really a gift, isn't it?
it was an amazing gift, I mean, and everybody was there, I mean, we'd be sitting there and listening to this stuff. You'd have Clifford Jordan and George Mraz
Yeah.
and John
Yeah.
Abercrombie and Byrack and
Yeah.
uh,
And
George
George Coleman
Coleman,
and Junior
George
Cook,
Coleman, Eddie
everybody.
Henderson,
Yeah.
Jerry
Listening to you.
Gonzalez. Every of these cats would be just in the audience. In fact, it was funny. I saw the movie Amadeus, and I hadn't seen it. I was talking to John Abercrombie, whose birthday was yesterday, by the way.
Right. I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, and John and I were real good friends. And I said to John, "What are you doing tonight?" We were thinking, and he asked me what I was doing. I said, "Oh, my girlfriend and I are going to go here. We're going to go see Amadeus. We haven't seen it yet." He said, "Oh, I saw that." I said, "Really? What's it like?" He said, basically, Bradley's 4 o'clock in the morning.
That's the best movie review ever, isn't
Isn't that the shortest and the most correct?
it? Most correct, descriptive, perfect.
And all that,
Bradley's at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's hilarious.
It's right,
That's great.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
So other cats. Let me just go through all these people because you said
Oh,
that about me, but you have had the similar experience.
yeah.
Acceptance in the community, and
There's also a lot of people that I never played with, but got hung out. Like I remember, in Nice, spending 7 days with Jimmy Rowles. Just I mean, I never played with him, but we hung out, we talked, and it was just the greatest.
Yeah, I had my Jimmy Rowles a little
That was
experience.
a high point, man. I just being around. I mean, we never got, because I was with Woody and he was playing. I forget who he was playing with, but he was. We spent a lot of time just backstage shooting the breeze. Just being around him was so cool. Because I love the Peacock, that record with
Oh,
the,
sure, yeah,
you
with
know,
Stan.
with the, oh my God, that record just like knocked me out. And
Yeah,
like,
it's an amazing song. It's like if Ravel wrote jazz.
oh, it's an incredible
Doesn't
song.
it? It sounds like a song written by Ravel. I mean,
Yeah,
almost, But I've got a Jimmy Rolls for you. I did a Milady's Tavern on is it not Spring? The street right below. Uh, Gosh, in the Village anyway, West Village,
okay, yeah,
and it's heading down not Spring Street, one street above Spring Street,
okay.
and it's there. And it's got a pool table. So I'm there with a friend, and this guy is whistling or humming some obscure standard, like "So Beats My Heart for You" or something like this, as he's shooting pool. And I had never seen Jimmy Rolls because he was just in New York for a short time. I mean, he'd been moved from California
Hmm.
over there, and so I hear him whistling, singing, and I said, "Are you a musician?" He said, "Yeah." That gruff voice. "Yeah, I'm a musician." And I said, "Oh, well, that's an interesting tune. Is that so beats my heart for you, or one of those things?" Whenever he was, you know, and he says, "Yeah, you know that song." I said, "Yeah, I know that song. I know. I like songs. I know that. Who are you?" He said, "Oh, I'm Jimmy Rolls." I said, "Well, you're the master. I know about you. I mean, I've heard you just about know every song." So we started to talk, and he was living down the street from Milady's Tavern
Hmm.
on. Man, it's bothering me because there's one street.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
You got like Houston Street, and then you go one block south, and then you go two blocks south, and you got
it's
Spring.
Spring Street. Yeah, it's
And
between
it's,
Spring and Houston.
yeah, and it's the streets there. But anyway,
Hmm.
so no matter. We say so we start talking, and he was living with Beverly Getz at the time,
Hmm.
uh, and there was quite an age difference there. And they had an apartment on that street, and my friend had some goodies, and we decided to go over to Jimmy's place, and he didn't have a piano, but he had a flugelhorn, and because my father was a trumpet player, I can play melodies on flugelhorn. I tell people that I've been told that I sound like early Miles on flugelhorn. Miles at about 7 or 8 years old. Uh,
Young Miles.
Very young Miles. And but what was funny is we had this great conversation, and we kept passing the flugelhorn back, and it was like, "Do you know this one?" And then I'd play a few notes, and he'd say, "Oh yeah, man, that's a wonderful one." Then we'd sing the whole tune together, and then we do this. So then we decided. I said, "Man, I'd really love to play with you." So he said, "Sure." He said, "Why don't you come over?" And I said, "Arturo's are good friends of mine, the people at Arturo's.
Hmm.
They'll open the restaurant. They open it up about 4 in the afternoon, but it's closed to the public until 6. But we could go in for the first couple hours and play the piano there, and have a nice time together." He says, "Oh, that sounds good." And I did this like 2 or 3 times.
With Jimmy Rolls.
Yeah, I went to pick him up, except we never played a note. We would go, I'd pick him up, and on the way, all we had to do was get to Thompson Street. And he was already on Sullivan Street, I think, so he was further up to McDougal. I remember that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and we'd start to go. He'd say, "Want to stop in?
And
Maybe
get a
we'll play a
taste.
game of pool, have a drink, and
There
then
you
on
go.
the way, and I've got my horn. Yeah, okay, let's do that." And then he would always end up getting us in a game of pool with like two guys. We'd be a team and playing 8-ball, and he'd scratch on the damn 8-ball or lose, like, and I was getting to be a losing proposition of money hanging out with him because we'd buy drinks from
Right.
people.
It's starting
And,
to cost you.
yeah, and then he would not want to leave because he'd have to play another game of pool.
So
And
you
then
never played.
we never got as far as Arturo's to play any music.
It's a total New York story.
Total New York story, right? And,
It's beautiful.
but we talked about tunes
Right.
while we were shooting pool and doing all this, and he told me how much he loved Buster Williams
Mm-hmm.
and how much he loved Wayne Shorter.
Yeah, he loved Wayne.
Yeah, and so he would talk to me about, checking that out more deeply. And I mean, he was a lovely guy, but I mean, and he had emphysema too at the time, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
But, but I thought that was so
It's fabulous.
New York. Didn't play a single note. But
Yeah, he knew a lot of tunes, man. He was
yeah.
like, a lot of old school guys like Dave McKenna and those guys who just knew a lot. Every song ever written.
Did you know Bill Rubenstein?
I did not.
He's another one. Knew lots of tunes.
He
Really.
played piano. He was a pianist?
Yeah, he was a terrific pianist.
Oh, shoot. I never met him.
Yeah, he was very under the radar, but really wonderful. Yeah, I could go on about him, but I don't. That's another conversation. We should just hang out sometime.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Do that,
I'll come over. I still want to bring some of my students to your apartment and just hang out and talk and play and get into this with them. It would be just the best.
Oh, that would be good.
Some time to spend with you. Yeah, my purchase students.
Oh yeah. Oh, that would be great. Grant Stewart sends me a class. We do that, and he actually found a way to get me, to get paid and stuff.
You mean Grant Stewart? Oh, from his school, you mean?
He's got his school, and they come to
he's
my
got
house.
a great school, man.
Yeah, and I can't travel. I can't even really leave the house much. But if everybody's vaccinated, they can come here.
Yeah, I wouldn't bring anybody non-vaccinated. No way.
So, just thinking of some other relationships in here. The guy I wanted to ask you about, and a guy who intimidated me, was, I will tell you the Bill Evans story later, but
Okay.
a guy who intimidated the hell out of me was Bob Brookmeyer.
Bob Brookmeyer could do that.
Because, not in anything, he was kind of quiet and tall. He seemed like a, and when Richie Kamuka would bring me over to the Griffin show, he was in that band sometimes. And my dad and I used to go on Monday nights to the Vanguard and catch that band. This is the 1968 Vanguard band, and he was there every week. And, there he was. And at Jim and Andy's, where I hung out all the time, too. He was always hanging out there. But I was intimidated by him.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were. He was a very imposing presence. Very correct. I mean, when he took over, he became the musical director when Mel Lewis was alive. But for a couple of years, he was the musical director of the band, and we used to rehearse a lot. And he was really precise and detail oriented. Where we thought we were sounding good, but man, in front of the band, he was, he kind of was very. I wouldn't say, tore us apart, but he was very particular in terms of how he wanted things played. So he would stand in front of us and, really work us on these charts. I think maybe we got a little too comfortable, a little too lazy, a little too, in our own world. And he didn't want any of that. He was just, he really was an exacting, really articulation-wise, time-wise, sound-wise. He wanted the band to sound a real certain way. And, at that point, he was also writing very intense music, very atonal.
He got into serial music, right? Serial composition.
Yeah, very, it was, some of it was hard to play and some of it was hard to, I'm sure from an audience point of view, I think he was trying to write music that would make people squirm a little in their chairs. I
Was
think
he writing it for that band? I didn't realize he was doing...
writing it for the bands in Europe. He was writing it for us. He wrote an arrangement featuring Tom Harrell of My Funny Valentine. And then he wrote a piece called, what was the name of that piece? Like, it was, I think, about, Native American with humming and flutes and all this. And, so
the whole piece stuff.
kind of some of that. And then, so he was writing very, a lot of serious, like you said, like atonal, experimental kind of music. And that was, I think, from an audience point of view, might have been a little hard to listen to. And it was very hard for us to play. And I'll tell you just a story that, we played at the Monterey Jazz Festival. I guess it's okay to tell this story. It was a long time ago. And so Basie, it was, Count Basie's band, and then us, Mel Lewis with Bob conducting, so it was, and so Basie's band, I think it was Frank Foster was conducting, and they're playing, swinging, playing just
April in Paris, and
people are having a ball. They got their picnic blankets and they're drinking wine, and the kids are running around, and it's just unbelievable to see. They're playing all that stuff, shiny stockings, and swing. It's like, man, we're backstage going great, and then we play, Mel Lewis with, and then playing this, and we start with this atonal, really edgy, really hard music, from a not exactly festival. People are there to listen to swing. It's like good time. This was
Stan
really
Getz sound like Jimmy Lunsford, right?
This was very intense, very deliberate, very atonal, very it was really kind of. And man, it was like people were like, look at us, and the wine goes in the basket. The kids are like, let's go, pack it. And man, we cleared the Monterey Jazz Festival in about 20 minutes. People split. It was really hard, man. But that was his, it was Brookmeyer. It was really inspiring to see somebody so deeply dedicated to stretching to the next thing.
Yeah.
But I could see, as a young musician being around him, how you would think that, wow, this guy's a very imposing presence. And, he also, I think, as a baritone player, and I think Pepper probably might have felt that too, because I don't think because he played so much with Mulligan, and that was like such a deep relationship that Brookmeyer never wrote any solos for Pepper in the band. There's no baritone solos that he wrote that featured Pepper. So I think Pepper's sound, I don't know if it was just, I don't know what, but it was just kind of, maybe he had Mulligan sound in his head, but all the music that he wrote for the band, he didn't write anything for Pepper to play, really. It's interesting to me.
Yeah, I read a couple of his blogs. He had a blog for a while.
Yeah.
That was, it's fascinating. He would just write what he thought about just about everything from basketball.
It was very political, his writing. He was in politics.
He couldn't stand Bush.
Yeah.
And he and he also didn't really care for Wynton Marsalis. That was another pet peeve of his.
Whatever. That's that's fine. Whatever that. But just as a musician, you can't really forget that even while he was writing all of that music that was really edgy and really kind of teeth grating, and he wrote a beautiful record for a vocalist in Denmark, and swinging just like he could still write like he did. He could do it. I don't think it was necessary direction he wanted to go in, but man, this record, just some of the most beautiful vocal arrangements you'll ever hear, just astonishingly beautiful. So as a musician, he's unparalleled for me.
He was a tremendous
he was just an unbelievable musician, so educated, but I still when we used to play with the band at the Vanguard, he would, he'd be sitting right in front of me while I was playing. I'm like, wow, this is a little intimidating to be blowing and Brookmeyer sitting right in front of me. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's like a scary moment. That was like really, oh man, this is really a heavy moment. Never in my life as a 14 or 15-year-old student, saxophone player on Long Island, did I ever think that I'd be sitting in, that chair with Bob Brookmeyer sitting in front of me playing. I mean, if somebody told me that when I was 15, that someday that's going to happen to you, I'll be like, yeah, right.
Yeah, I had a moment that was sort of like that when we were in Kongsberg, Norway, and Woody Shaw and Joe Henderson had played the concert in the afternoon there, and Liebman had broken his foot, something. This is in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in Norway doing some other concerts, and I happened to have a few days off.
Mm-hmm.
And they called me to sit in to take Liebman's place with the quartet that was known as Quest at the time.
Yeah, Bayrak and Billy Hart. Yeah,
and Ron McClure.
What a great band! Wow, you got to sub for Liebman in that?
Yeah, I played for a week, and we played in a mine shaft. It was funny. We also played.
Wow.
But I'd known Joe Henderson for a few years, and he was always really nice to me. And I'd known Woody since I was a teenager. I mean, we were friends for a long time.
Yeah.
But Joe invited me once to sit in with him on a Sunday at the Vanguard, like long time before.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my one gig that month on that Sunday elsewhere.
Oh, that's funny. And always like that, right?
Yeah, and then Joe never asked me again. You know,
and
I didn't want to ask him, and it was just an opportunity. But I've always felt bad about that.
Mm-hmm.
But so when we were playing that night, Woody came, and Woody sat in with us with that band.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe didn't bring his horn, but he sat and listened to the whole night. And so that was a little bit.
It's nerve-wracking, right?
Nerve-wracking, I mean, I was like, I just had to forget, like you imagine him naked. That didn't work either. I didn't try that, but I mean.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, people sit in front of you like your idols and they listen to you play. It's like you can't help but feel like you're under some kind of microscope. It's really hard. Like I loved Frank Strozier. Frank Strozier was one of my heroes on the saxophone.
Oh, you got to tell me about him. Please tell me.
So I played at the Femios, this club in Yonkers. Did you ever play there?
I got a funny story about that too, but you tell me.
So I was playing and he came. He lived in Dobbs Ferry. He was teaching science in Dobbs Ferry.
That's right. He said he loved music too much to teach it.
Yeah, he didn't. He stopped playing and became a science teacher, which is like another whole. I mean, what a tragedy of music. The guy
and then he came back as a pianist, right?
Yes, and he played at Wild Recital Hall. He gave one concert at Wild Recital Hall playing piano. It was kind of. But anyway, so he sat in front of me the whole night, and I was like, I was freaking out. I was like, I couldn't play a note. I was so nervous to have someone like that, one of my heroes, who absolutely I thought was one of the geniuses on the alto. Man, nobody.
I think so too, man.
Nobody played like that. If you listen to like What's Going On, the way.
Oh, and even before Long Night.
And
How Little We Know, The Gal That Got Away.
Yeah, The Man That Got Away.
That whole record.
And
Happiness is Just a Thing Called Joe.
Yeah, March of the Siamese Children. That was another record that he made. So Long Night had George Coleman and Pat Patrick. That had 3 saxophones on it.
Yeah, but then the quartet side of Long Night.
Yeah, exactly. Great.
Chris Anderson and Will Lee.
Chris Anderson I played with a few times at Sonny's.
Yeah, I got to play with him quite.
He was incredible, man. That was something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Frank Strozier came and sat in front of me for 2 sets, and I was a wreck. I went home feeling like, oh man, that just messed me up in the worst way.
But you got to hang out with him?
Just a little bit. He was very quiet. I tried to get lessons with him. I mean, because I lived in Hastings, and he lived in Dobbs Ferry. We lived in the next town, and he would never teach me. He just wouldn't give me lessons. I asked him over and over again. He just, I don't know, for some reason he didn't want to teach. I just wanted to be around him, just like, but it just never happened.
I played opposite him one time at the Village Gate. We did a radio show with Chet's quintet, and we were opposite George Coleman's octet.
Right.
And Strozier was in that band.
Of course, yeah.
but I didn't. Unfortunately, we were running between Strikers uptown
Hmm.
and grabbing a cab and doing our set at the gate, and then going back uptown. So I didn't really get to hear him. But I mean, that record, Long Night, and
Beautiful, right?
the record with Booker Little, as
Yeah,
well with Wynton Kelly, Miles rhythm section
yeah,
with the Wynton Kelly, Jimmy Cobb, Paul Chambers,
yeah, exactly.
where they play
Young
on
Men
the
from
floor.
Memphis with Mabes
Yeah, what is it?
on VJ.
Demons, Waltz of the
Yeah,
Demons,
Walter the Demon in that blues, the first blues, da, 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 whatever that
WD
blues is.
Blues or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
man, just forget it.
yeah, that was.
One of the all-time greats.
Oh, did you hear the thing he did with the Oliver Nelson band? The
Yeah, I
first,
remember Bird.
I remember Bird at the
Yeah,
Hollywood.
that was Phil's thing first with Oliver Nelson. That was Phil's
Right, that was
big
Phil's thing
piece.
with Strozier's.
Yeah, plays that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, he was. Yeah, I always wanted, but he only did that one concert on piano, and then
Yeah,
no
I
more of
think
that.
I think that was it, and he just retired. I heard he moved to Rhode Island in some kind of an over 55 retirement community, and I mean, for a while, I used to call him on his birthday, just wish him a happy birthday, but he, never picked up. He was very, shy, very private kind of person. But I did try to take lessons with him, but it was just, I mean, I was such a huge fan, like geeky fan of his. I
Yeah, well,
told, I told Mabes and George Cole, I told him, I said, man, I want to take some, this guy, nobody plays like this.
yeah,
And it just could never happen. He just wouldn't teach me.
yeah. Well, I was having a wonderful time for a while trying to put Frank Strozier and Lee Konitz together.
That would have been incredible. Can you
I was
imagine?
trying to play like that. I said I want to find somewhere in between.
Oh, I thought you tried to get him to do a gig together.
No, but I was trying to get him to do a gig inside my head. I mean, somewhere to find a middle ground in my own playing where I could not copy either one, but kind of reflect
Yeah,
the qualities. It was just like a concentrated period of time.
yeah.
I was listening to both of them intensely,
I could see that. Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, and I finally did play him for Konitz because Konitz didn't know his playing.
Really?
Yeah, and about 4 years before Lee died, he was at my house one night,
Wow.
and I said, "Are you interested in Frank Strozier?" He says, "Well, I've heard him, but I've never really listened to him in depth."
Hmm.
I said, "Sit down. I got some shit to play for you."
Hmm.
And Lee was very delighted by it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Really liked, but he said he hadn't really known his playing. He maybe
Wow.
heard him, but he had not really thought of it as anything. Nobody sat him down and said, "Listen to this."
Yeah, yeah.
I had done that, and I have one little Strozier thing too. When I went to Brazil in 1974,
Hmm.
I had been playing with, remember Glenn Zatola?
Yeah, of course. I play. He and his brother had, like, they wrote this incredible music, like for an octet or a 9-piece band, right? Is that the same guy?
Yeah, Glenn Zatola. He played trumpet and saxophone.
Yeah, yeah.
And Glenn was a good buddy of mine at that time. He became a Scientologist. And that's how actually he was in my band. And then I got Tom Harrell because Glenn was going on the boat with L. Ron Hubbard or something, and he couldn't make a concert.
Wow.
So Mike Brecker said, "I got a trumpet player for you. He just joined Horace, and we're off that week."
Hmm.
Sent Tom over to me. That's how Tom and I met.
Wow.
But anyway, Glenn had this gig at a place called the White Elephant in Port Chester.
Hmm.
And it was a Tuesday night gig, I think. It was one night a week. And I said, well, I got to go to Brazil. So I was going to go for a few months to Brazil. And Glenn said, I said, I guess you got to get a sub. And Glenn said, because Strozier, this is 1974. He said, I got Frank Strozier.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. And it was a double wow. One wow was, wow, you got Frank Strozier. And then, wow, I better look for another gig.
It's funny.
Yeah, they're not going to want me after that. So I came back, and Glenn says, you got to come back on the gig. I said, well, if you want me, and I said, how was this Frank Strozier? He said, oh, he's fantastic. He's great. But he drove us crazy with reeds. He was always changing reeds and saying he couldn't find a good reed. And sometimes he'd go through 4 or 5 in a set on a bandstand, and fortunately he said he was going to go back to teaching more and couldn't really continue. So you're coming back just in time. it's not awkward at all. But he said it was funny that he,
Oh, that's interesting because that's the story I heard is why he stopped playing because he said he couldn't find a reed. That's true then.
yeah, he told somebody else that. He said when they used to make the reeds in Cuba, those were the good reeds.
Interesting. Okay, because I heard that story, but I thought it was like, oh, come on. Then there would be no saxophone players because we all have the same problem.
Yeah, well, according to Glenn, though, he said he really took it to another, was changing reeds several times a set.
Wow, that's okay. Well, then I guess there's truth in that story. That's interesting. That's an extreme reaction.
Yeah, well, I see he's
quit.
An extreme type of cat,
I guess.
He sure was an extremely great player.
Oh my God.
Ira Sullivan told me that he and Booker Little had a house together in Chicago, and that house, if they weren't playing there, somebody else was. 24 hours a day, there was music coming out of that house.
Mm-hmm.
You could fall by that house at any hour and play with somebody.
Wow. Yeah. Sounds like my building.
Yeah, it was like your building. And, Mike Brecker had Liebman's old loft. And we had that. Sometimes Mike and I would play, and 2 or 3 different rhythm sections would come in the course of like 8 to 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd keep playing with all of them.
Great, right?
Yeah, and
that's what you have to do, right?
Yeah, that was, and well, for you're fortunate if God gives you the opportunity to have it, right? Freddie Hubbard.
Oh, my experience with Freddie Hubbard was, I was on his last record. That's all. Vincent Harry and Carl Allen put this, I think it's called Monk. I forget the name of it, but it was kind of emotional. He was kind of struggling through that whole thing. That was kind of Freddie at the end.
He had no chops left.
It was difficult. It was a difficult. So we wound up just playing the horn parts, and then he came and tried to play that. It was just, after, what can you say about Freddie Hubbard? I mean, it's like at his peak. What can you say?
And I didn't know how well you had known him.
No, I wasn't. I did this one record, and I think played 1 or 2 gigs just backing him up. But I mean, it was never any deep personal connection or even being on the bandstand with him in any kind of deep way, except just hearing him. But it was at the end.
Yeah. So just to finish up, Gary, I just wanted to get into the area. One thing I've always really loved and respected about you was that you've maintained a very long relationship with your marriage to Joan.
Mm-hmm.
And and you have 1 child, right?
2.
You have 2 children.
I have a son and a daughter. Yeah, both in their 30s. Yes.
And that now your wife, Joan Cornacci, she's a conductor, or
no? She's a pianist and musician in a deep way, but went into the disability world later on in her career. So now she works for Supported Decision Making New York. She's the associate director of SDMNY, which keeps people with disabilities from being put under guardianship. So she's like in a human rights work through CUNY Hunter. So she's launched in different directions because we have a 33-year-old daughter who's got a mild learning disability. So she was an inspiration.
What kind of disability?
She has a thing called Williams syndrome, which is just a genetic anomaly. But she's great. She lives in Cambridge. She works at MIT, has a job, has an apartment, is completely independent. She's doing great. But she was inspiring. She was an inspiration. And I credit we'll be married 40 years next year. And my wife's an angel on earth. I've been fortunate enough to, our marriage has been strong and staying together. And I've been pretty much on the road, and she's been real supportive of everything I've done. So I've been really fortunate and blessed to be with her all this time. And now, it's kind of time for her. She wants to go in a direction, become a consultant and, be more active in the disability world. So that's, time for her to do that.
Now you moved out to Amherst, and
We
was
did.
that partly the reason? Because I
Yes.
heard that you have a job, you yourself have a at least part-time or an involvement with the Berkshire Hills.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Berkshire Hills Music Academy is a music school because one of the characteristics of this disability, I don't like to call it disability because it's not really a disability. It's a different kind of ability. Is a strong sense of music. A lot of people with Williams syndrome have perfect pitch. My daughter, she played the violin. She could play anything. She doesn't really practice that much, but she picked up the violin. She could play anything in any key. It's just something that they have. It's a gift that many of them with people with Williams syndrome are born with. In fact, so much so that Oliver Sacks, the psychologist, spent time at this school, and at this, there's also a camp up there in Western Mass, and so it's a very interesting syndrome that presents a lot of musicality. So we moved up to Amherst because we were living in Hastings, and our daughter was in high school, and we didn't really feel like they could serve her needs at this point. So they wanted to ship her out of district to Rye or Mamaroneck or some other. We didn't really want to put her on a bus. We felt you should go to school where you live, walk to school and have a social life and all that. So rather than, we just said, well, I need an airport. I don't need to be here. And so we packed up and moved to Amherst, and she went to school in Amherst, which is a lot more low key. It wasn't as intense as Lower Westchester, a lot of kind of bullying. It was just like not a great place for her to be. So we moved up there and spent 8 years. She graduated high school, went to school went to the Threshold program at Lesley University in Boston, which was a program for people with disabilities. And she graduated from there, wound up staying in Boston. So, and then we moved back to New York about 8 years later. So we after the pandemic, we sold our house, and now we have a condo on the Hudson in Yonkers. But that's kind of so we just packed up our stuff and relocated, and we spent 8 years up there.
Well, these, it's great that you got to do that and that your wife has found, this other career and everything.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable what she's doing. Yeah, it's incredible work.
There was what he said goes for me too. There was a famous thing of Joey Bishop following somebody at a roast or something, and following Bob Hope or one of the great George Jessel or one of the great raconteurs and this and that, and he killed everybody. The guy had everybody in stitches, hurting with laughter, and then it was Joey Bishop's turn. And he got up, and he was up there for just a few seconds, and he said, what he said goes for me too. And he walked off the stage.
Well, first of all, who's Joey Bishop? No, I know. I mean, people go like, who's Joey Bishop?
Nobody would know Joey
Bishop. Who's Georgie Jessel?
Yeah, George Jessel. That's really stretching it.
But that's also that's a whole other thing we could talk about another time. Is like that whole, the Dean Martin roast and Don Rickles and Foster Brooks. And
right, that kind of thing, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Or you mentioned the Borscht Belt. People go, the what?
Yeah, the Borscht Belt. What is that?
What the heck was that,
What's Borscht?
Borscht Belt. I worked with the piano player who plays on Bird's original Just Friends record.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Bernie Layton.
Bernie Layton, okay.
Yeah, I played a gig at the Borscht Belt, Rosingers, or one of those Kutchers, one of those places when I was like in my early 20s, and he was on piano. And I'll never forget him because, I told him, oh man, I know your solo. I sang it to him, your Just Friends solo. And, we talked, and he was a really nice cat. And he asked me if I'd like a cigarette, and I was smoking because I cigarettes. And he handed me a cigarette. And I said, well, sure, you know, and it was a Pall Mall. I said, no, I don't usually smoke non-filters. So I turned it down. He said, you might enjoy this one. I said, what? He said, maybe you should just try it. So we're there in the fold. All the Jews are around, you know, drinking the Shirley Temples.
Right.
Big drinkers, you know, and we're about to play the dance set, and I'm smoking, and I realize he takes out the tobacco and puts reefer in half of it, and then he's got tobacco in the other half. So he smoked those all night. He just, you know, because you could smoke on the bandstand in those days.
Right.
He just went from one to the other, and you know, must have smoked like at least 10 of them in the course of the evening.
Wow.
That was funny. He had that going, you know.
That was also like, you know, a training ground, like for the playing at the Nevele and all the Kutchers and all those hotels, backing up, you know, Henny Youngman and Myron Cohen and all these, you know,
Yeah.
Catskill comics, Milton Berle, God, all the people that we used to
Yeah,
back up, and everybody did that. John Mosca, Andy Foster. I mean, that was just a gig that we all did, playing up in the mountains. It's a world that doesn't exist anymore, really.
Yeah, I only did a few of those, but because I wasn't a good reader, you know, so I
Yeah.
in the and I didn't double.
Right.
That
But a
was
lot of
good.
it was just playing the comic on and off.
Yeah, some of it was just that. Oh, one funny story of playing the comic on and off. We were playing Julius LaRosa once,
Mm-hmm.
and it was at some club in Long Island. And Julius LaRosa was a very good singer who was on the Arthur Godfrey show, and he was very Sinatra style, very good in that kind of style. And his career got blacklisted because he had an affair with somebody else who was on the show, and Arthur Godfrey was a real prude. And I think one of them was married, and he found out about it. And then the publicity, Walter Winchell and somebody found out about it, and that was basically the end of Julius LaRosa's career. He went from, he could have been a big national celebrity to having a little New York show on the radio. You know, he never really made it.
Yeah, he was like Perry Como, Al Martino, like he was like in that like Italian pop singer world.
Right, and then his career got derailed from this scandal
Huh.
that had to do with that. Yeah, so anyway, he's there. Now there's a comic in between, and the comic is really not very funny. And, you know, even the band's heard all his humor, you know, this and that. And so he comes to me because I was jamming in between sets. They had an organ player, and somehow I would be there. So he took me to be influential, which I was not. I had nothing to do with anything. You know, I'm just there as a player, you know. And Sam Burtis is in the band.
Oh my God, yes.
You know, and Gary Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was in New York at that point. And, you know, a couple other cats I couldn't remember. Maybe Tom Malone. Anyway, these guys were there. And between sets, somebody has this Thai pot. Not Thai weed, but Thai marijuana.
Oh.
Which was strong.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the comic had said to me, you know, if you guys, when I come on, could you bring me on with a fanfare? Because, you know, like coming on to Silence, you guys didn't even give me anything. They announced me, and now comedy with such and such, whatever his name was, and
right.
Nothing.
No music.
You know, music. He said, so, you know, can I just ask you to please bring me on with some kind of fanfare or something? So we got high, and we come back, and I forgot, you know what I mean? Like the pot was strong, and I realized, so now we're sitting in our chairs, and they're about to bring him on. And I say, oh shit, the fanfare. So I don't know whether I did it on purpose or I couldn't remember. It's been a long time ago. But I turned to the trombones and said, fine and dandy in C. I turned to the trumpets and I said, show business in E flat.
Were you the leader of this band?
No, but I said, the comic asked me, I prefaced it. The comic said, we got to bring him on with a fanfare, you know, so
you played two tunes in two different keys?
Three different keys. Then the saxophones I brought on with Everything's Coming Up Roses. So da 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 in a different key. So those three tunes were all played at the same time. And I actually thought that would be a beautiful fanfare for any comic with a sense of humor to have. It would be.
Not him. He didn't like it.
He did not like it. He got mad at me.
He got mad at you.
Yeah, he said, thanks a fucking lot.
You're not the leader.
What kind of fanfare was that? Well, he asked me to do him a favor. He said, can you do me a favor? So I said, yeah. He said, I need a fanfare. So I said, sure. And then
tell him to change his name to Stravinsky.
Yeah, right. That would have been better, you know.
You gotta be.
Just one more story. All right, so the Bill Evans thing is I was hanging out, living at New England Conservatory when I was about 18. And Jackie Byard had heard me in New York and invited me up to play a concert with him in Boston with him and Alan Dawson, Buell Neidlinger, the bassist.
Yeah, sure.
They had a trio, and he was doing a concert at Harvard University. And Jackie really liked the way I played and brought me around New York and everything that summer. He was really nice to me. We would play male impersonators at the Club 82 on Sunday evening. And he even brought me there to play duets with him. And he was playing the Village Gate, the solo piano gig on the week. And so I'd come almost every night and play with him there for a set. So I'm up in New England, and I'm hanging out at the conservatory. Roger Rosenberg was studying there at the time too. You know Billy Saxton?
Oh yeah, Bill Saxton, sure.
Yeah, well, Bill, you know, one must understand at that time, Martin Luther King had just been assassinated the year before, 2 years before, and the blacks were justifiably upset. I was justifiably upset too. But I was getting from Bill and some of the other guys was like, you know, why do you want to play jazz? Why don't you play your own music? You know, you should, you know, leave us our music and you should play white people's music. And we can leave Billy's name out of that. So I would say some of the black musicians were resentful of my playing jazz. I was even studying composition with Joseph Maneri and thinking of becoming a conductor, because if it was true that it wasn't to be my music, then I should do this. So coincidentally, Bill Evans came to town as I was going through this dilemma. And I said, maybe I should just go down. And, you know, you have balls of brass when you're 18. I think I'll go down and introduce myself to Bill and tell him about this problem. He's a white jazz musician. Maybe he ran into it, you know. Maybe he'd be sympathetic. Who knows?
Wow.
Yeah. So I did. I went down to the workshop, and after his first set of the night, I said, Mr. Evans, I really have a simple question for you, and I really, really feel that you're the guy that could help me answer this. And he said, sure. He said, I got a minute. So we sat down, and I told him the situation. I said, you know, that they say it's not my music. Did you ever experience this? He says, well, I did experience that sometimes. He said, you know, when I was with Miles, I experienced that. He said, but not with the guys in the band as much as the audiences. Be disappointed, or I felt they were disappointed that I wasn't black sometimes. He said, but more than that, earlier, he said, when I went to school in New Orleans or Louisiana, wherever it was, Baton Rouge, whatever, I don't think it was New Orleans. But he said, I was a flute major. He said, I minored in piano, but flute was my major, and I thought I'd possibly become a classical flautist, however you say it. And he said, but, you know, finally I decided not to do that. He said, but I was hearing the same type of racism in the 50s, you know, those kind of remarks that it wasn't my music, and I thought maybe they're right. And, you know, so I said, well, what made you change your mind? What made you decide to become a jazz pianist and not a classical flautist? He said, well, and he would look at you with these intense eyes. He said, it really depends. And he thought about it for a second. He didn't answer right away. He said, it depends upon the need to swing. how much do you need to swing? Ask yourself, do you need to swing? If you don't need to swing, then you can be involved in other kinds of music. If you have to swing, you're a jazz musician.
That's an incredible answer. But he's right too, right?
Yeah, he was right. Then he did something else incredible. I figured since I got this far, let me try step two. So I said, Mr. Evans, I've written a couple of tunes,
Wow.
and I'm not even suggesting remotely that I want you to play them. I mean, I'm not trying to sell them to your band or whatever they do with tunes, but I would wonder if you might give me a few minutes to play them and let you hear them, and just let me know if you think I have any talent as a composer, or give me some suggestions, maybe for 5 minutes about just how I could, what kind of things I might do because I love your tunes, and I studying classical composition, but I've never really studied jazz composition. Anything you can tell me would be helpful. And he said, tonight I'm busy. He said, but why don't you come back tomorrow night and bring your tunes? And why don't you sit with my wife and I? That was his wife who eventually
Married him. Yeah, I mean, managed him.
no,
Right?
not that one. No, it was the wife that committed suicide. I
Oh,
think
right.
that was Elaine.
Mhm.
But I sat with her, and he let me sit with them between sets, and I
Wow.
stayed the whole night. And at the end of the night, he said, "You got your tunes?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he said, "Come on." And he waited. We waited for people to clear out of the club, and he sat at the piano, and he played my tunes.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That takes a lot of nerve. I take my hat off to you for doing that.
he seemed like a nice guy, and I just thought it just seemed natural. I knew Ira Sullivan pretty well at that time, and I'd known some musicians. I'd already met Stan
Right.
and Konitz and Phil, and so to me he was, just another genius. No, I mean
No, I mean, but like they ask you, like if you look at your tunes, that's courageous.
maybe it was, but the beautiful thing was he did.
Yeah,
And the funny thing
that's
was, of the two, one I was sure he was going to like quite a bit, and the other one I wasn't so sure of. And it was the other way around.
hmm,
One I thought he was really going to dig. He said, this is nice. That they're both nice, and you definitely have some talent in that area, and you should keep writing. He said, but this one, I think is special. It was a little waltz I wrote, and I thought it was funny because he liked the one that I thought he wouldn't.
interesting. Well,
That's
I
kind
mean,
of
not very many people can say they sat with Bill Evans at the piano while they played their tunes.
Yeah. I mean, that was
That's
and
kind of
after
magic.
that, whenever I would see him, I could have hung out with him more, but the drugs scared me.
Yeah.
And even after I'd been with Chet Baker, Bill still scared me. See,
Yeah, it's scary to be around, man, because I get sucked into that. You don't, yeah, I get that.
yeah, and I got sucked into it a little bit with Chet. So, though I was never strung out or anything, but I had my little fling, and I probably would have gotten to know him better had I.
Yeah, it was good. So it's good to keep a distance from that. It does, it's also the pressure of being around it.
Yeah. Oh, that which reminds me of a couple of one more question I'm going to ask you before we go, because then we should go. Um, when you were raised, I guess you have Jewish parents on both
Yeah,
sides.
I was bar mitzvah, yes, Ukrainian, Hungarian, Jews, yes. My
And
mother's side was Hungarian. My dad's side was Ukrainian.
did you light candles on Friday nights or?
No, we weren't. After I went to Hebrew school, but after I was bar mitzvah, my parents never. We really never did that again. It was really like the Hebrew school, studying Hebrew, doing the Haftorah in Hebrew, studying Hebrew, and then, but it was like once that was over, that tradition of that was They didn't really. They became really more cultural Jewish than religious Jewish.
Yeah, that's how
But I have
I'm
to,
raised too.
but I have to tell you, I last March and April, my wife and I we went to Israel for 2 weeks. Spent a week in Jerusalem and a week in Tel Aviv. I had a couple gigs, but it was really more, a handful of gigs in 2 weeks. And then I just got back. I was in Tel Aviv last week for
With
4 days.
Magnarelli, right?
Yeah, with Joe Magnarelli, and we played 4 concerts. And it's now as a older, I'm approaching 70. I'm finding more connection to Jewish as being more like deeper than cultural, just more of a connection to, especially once you go there and experience being in Israel. I don't know, for me, it was a very deep and profound 2 visits in terms of identifying. Maybe it's because of what's going on with the war. It could be, I don't know what the I can't really put a pin on exactly the exact reason, but it's a very deep place, and I think it touched me in a way that was deeper than just cultural.
Have you, in the course of of your life, explored other spiritual practices at all, or music has been pretty
No,
much?
no, we many years ago, my wife and I, did study the Upanishads and Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita. There was a friend of ours who was, she was teaching this. So, but we stuck with that for a couple of years, and just not really so much. No, that was in one point. But it really has been, music, and but now, like I said, that I'm approaching getting older, identifying as a Jew has become deeper.
So that we've certainly covered a wide range of things with my little brother, Mr. Smulyan, which I think we kind of look a little bit familial to. I've been looking at you longer than I've had a chance to look at you in a long time, or maybe ever. And I see some almost familial things. Let me see. If I put my glasses on, see how we.
Yeah, separated at birth.
There it is. A little bit.
Brothers from another mother. Look at that, man. Wow.
There you go. Or is that there was once a record made? I wrote, Sullivan hit me to it, called Two Jews Blues.
All right, we have to revisit that.
Yep, next time.
Definitely.
All right, so thank you again.
Bob.
Thanks everybody for watching
on
the Real Side with Gary Smulyan. And please give us a like and come and subscribe. It don't cost you nothing, as they say.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks very much to Jessie Kaiser.
Yes.
As always, for her invaluable assistance in producing this. It wouldn't happen without you, Jessie. Thank you.
Bob, let me ask you a question. How many of these have you done? How many podcasts? How many people have you interviewed like this?
70.
Well, really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's quite a record, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's it's been kind of it's been a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun, and life.
Incredible, man. 70. That's a lot.
Yeah, well,
keep it going, and I'm glad to see that you're in good health too. It's really great to see.
Oh well, I am for the most part. I hope I am. You
look great.
It. Well, thank you. I'm I'm a little bit sad because actually I've lost 4 good friends in the last month.
That's rough, yeah.
I mean, not just acquaintances, but these are all people and they weren't all old. One was in a car accident at 51. And I don't know if you knew Danny Backer.
I did not. I'm sorry.
He's a singer and soprano player.
Okay.
And with Rosanna Vitro.
Oh, boy.
And he's in a vocal group, the Bopsters.
Oh, yeah, okay.
With
Royal Bopsters?
Royal Bopsters.
Oh.
With Amy London.
Yeah, I know that group.
Yeah, Danny was the singer. He died of a heart attack at 47 years old. He just died yesterday.
Horrible. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, you know, we're going to stick around,
Yeah, we have to.
you know, two alto cockers.
Two alto cockers, baby. That's it.
Alto cockers and a baritone, a bari cocker.
Two alto cockers. Tremendous. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All
Thanks
right,
for the
good.
opportunity. Thanks for doing this. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Good. I got to go call my kids before they go to sleep.
Do that.
All right.
All right, man. You're the best.
You too, man. God bless
See
you.
you, Bob. Same to you.
Bye-bye.
Best. Let's wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a happy and healthy 2025. And just wish everybody peace and you know, good things in life.
That's beautiful, Gary. And what he says goes for me too, and for Jesse.